Mike Kern here with the Missouri Valley, another Courtside Chat. We have our host, Harry Schroeder, labeled as iPhone 204 this episode. Jonathan Haute from UIC and Luke Martin, voice of the Indiana State Sycamores. Harry's on the road, so he's sitting in his car doing the show today. But Jay Hood, we'll let you get started here. Give us a brief introduction of your life as a UIC broadcaster, how you got the job, your radio show, and a couple of other things, and then we'll get to Luke and have him introduce himself.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up listening to UIC Flames basketball on AM 1000. That's when UIC had hockey, and of course they have a basketball team. And working with ESPN 1000 in my radio career, and I've been doing it for 30 plus years, working at the Score originally, and now ESPN Chicago since 2005. We were the home for the Flames for a long time, and so I started off as a pre and halftime host. Was able to do some color analysis for radio and television, and now the voice of the Flames for 7 of the 10 years I've been involved with the program. So it started with me as a kid listening to games on the radio for UIC, and now to be able to be the voice of it for radio and television is pretty awesome. Along with UIC Flames, I also am a talk show host, been a talk show host for a long time, but with David Kaplan doing mornings, the Cap and J Hood morning show, for 3 hours every morning and talking about Chicago sports and everything else in the Midwest. So we have a fun time with that. It's a hybrid of sports and entertainment. And so along with being the voice of the Flames, which is a dream, I'm doing Morning Drive, which I never thought I would be because I did evenings for a long time. So when they gave me the nod in August of 2020 to become a morning host, that's when I became a grown-up. Instead of leaving the bars at 2 a.m., I had to be in bed by 9. So now it's going to be able to do morning talk radio and having fun with it.
Thank you, sir. And I've enjoyed listening to you on the air. We've been following UIC, of course, a lot more closely than we did last year, but enjoy your Luke, tell us about your role with Indiana State and how you got started with the Sycamores.
It's hard to believe, Mike, but this is year 6 for me at Indiana State. It's one of those things when I got here, you had so many people who have been in this department, specifically communications, for a long time, like Ace Hunt, who hired me, and to now be the longest tenure person in our communications department. It's a little bit of a wake-up call still that I'm the longest lasting now in our communications wing here at Indiana State. But Mitch, I've been here for 6 years. I grew up in the state of Indiana, so I've been in Indiana the majority of my life. Graduated from Ball State University in 2014. Proud Ball State graduate, then left, went to UNCG, worked in the Southern Conference there for a year in Greensboro, North Carolina. And after a year of doing a lot of video production work at UNCG and announcing as well, had an opportunity to come to Terre Haute and work at an ESPN affiliate, which was owned by Emmis Communications at that time here in town. And that's what got me from Greensboro back to the state of Indiana. Unfortunately, station sold during the process when I came back. Ownership changed, so I had to look for a new job. And thankfully, Indiana State had an opening. And from that day, Indiana State has been so welcoming. I do a lot of different things here at Indiana State, from whether it's video, social media work, to, of course, our radio broadcast and television broadcast on the Valley on ESPN. So it doesn't feel like 6 years. It's gone by in a blink of an eye, but it's been a lot of fun, and just extremely thankful that so many people here within our department and the Terre Haute community has just been so welcoming to me and have really treated me like their own. I mean, I graduated from Ball State in 3.5 years. So I've spent more time here at Indiana State than I've spent anywhere else in my life, whether that's a working capacity or even an undergrad. So Indiana State's really become a big part of me.
Thank you, Luke. And as people who follow the Valley and Indiana State certainly know you have your hands in so many different parts of the outward, look of Indiana State and Indiana State athletics and the men's basketball program. All right, Harry, we're going to turn it over to you and let you ask our guests a couple of questions and see what we know about both teams.
Appreciate it, Mike. Good morning, everybody. I wanted to start with you, Jonathan. I told you I tried to dig in to try to find some things out. Tell me about your fascination with the world wrestling entertainment world.
Yeah, it's a funny story. When I was working at WSCR, the program director heard that I was a wrestling fan, and going back to the days with my dad, going to the International Amphitheater in Chicago, we'd go see Dick the Bruiser and Bobo Brazil and some of these great wrestlers, and it's kind of, we grew up really enjoying wrestling a lot. And then the program director heard me say that. He said, "Oh, you're a wrestling guy. You know what? We'd like to have a wrestling show here." I said, "What? Like a wrestling talk show?" This is the height of the Monday Night Wars when it was the WWE against WCW, where both shows were on at the same time. And they both had a 2-hour block between 8 and 10 Central. And I'd come on afterwards and give the wrap up of the show. That thing did moon landing ratings, Harry. I mean, it was huge because people really interested in wrestling. And so that's where it all came from. Just a conversation I had, an idle conversation at lunch. The program director hears it. And ever since, I can't get out of it. I've changed stations that people still ask me about wrestling. And so because of that, even though I was going to let it go, here comes a podcast. And now I'm still doing it now just to keep tabs on that audience, which goes to show you, the audience will know you for calling UIC basketball games or your takes on the Chicago Bears or whatever. But if you're a wrestling fan, an ardent wrestling fan, now people will know you for that and keep asking you questions. And so you give them a lifeline. Say, hey, you know what? I know that's what you know me for. So I'll answer your questions. I'll do it in a podcast form. And so I've been doing that since 1998, I believe, doing some kind of wrestling podcast or something on that level, just from an idle conversation at lunch. That's how it works, Pastor.
So tell me, which UIC basketball player would have the best opportunity to be a WWE wrestler?
Okay, so we have a lot of young freshmen, but I would say that our kid from France, Basante Saragba, he's one of these, silent but strong types. Yeah, he doesn't say a lot, but you see this guy's, he's big and muscle bound. That guy would give a tussle to anybody. He didn't say much, but he didn't have to say much. When you see him walk in the room, you're immediately saying, "Oh, the mood's about to change." So I'm going to say Saragba. And again, you got to look down on the roster for him because he's kind of reserve forward center for Luke Yockledge, but that's the guy you don't want to tumble with. The guy that didn't say anything, that's the guy you watch out for. Be careful of that guy.
Jonathan mentioned Luke doing this, doing that, a piece of this, did high school stuff like you have, Luke, and all kinds of different things. Luke, in your journey to take over there as the main broadcaster at Indiana State, talk about some of the odd jobs or the different things that you've done in radio.
Yeah, well, not just radio. I mean, I think in today's day and age, for anybody that wants to get in this, you have to be you don't necessarily want to be the jack of all trades. The jack of all trades means you're the master of none. You want to have something you're really good at. You want to have a skill set that you really want to hone, whether that's for me.
So that's my problem.
No, you're extremely talented, Harry. I promise you. You're extremely talented in the area.
I've just had an epiphany. Go ahead, Luke. Now I know my problem. Go forward.
Yeah, I guess I bring that out in people, Harry. But you have to be able. If I just was an announcer, I would not have this job. You have to be able to be skilled with a camera. Social media is what everybody is living for, and that specifically in NCAA college athletics, especially more now in name, image, and likeness, where athletes want to be able to utilize themselves and get their image. So there's many different roles, whether that's just going to practices, taking photos, taking video, being able to edit, know how to use Adobe Creative Suite, whether that's Adobe Premiere as an editing program, Lightroom when it comes to photos, Photoshop when it comes to editing graphics. That may not be, how does that help you with your play-by-play? But you have to have as many skills as possible, especially at our level. I mean, I know Jay Hood can relate to this at UIC. I mean, when we're at this level, Mike in the Valley office, I mean, we wish we had unlimited budgets. We wish we had, a ton of money to throw around where you can get a lot of different bodies. And that just doesn't happen at our level. And even though it is still the Division I level. So my advice always is, Harry, all those different tasks is, it only helps you grow. And it also helps you build great relationships. Just because you're always, I always try to tell you, you always want to be visible for your teams and you want to be around and be seen, but you also want to be present. Just because you're seen doesn't necessarily mean you have a presence. And what helps me is, I'll go to practice that day. I may be interviewing somebody. Today I'll be Jason Kent at practice and we'll do a little one-on-one interview that we've done with him and a player or a staff member. But it's also being able to be there and get highlights of practice, taking photos of guys. They get to know you in a different way. You get to travel with the team. You get to be present in many different ways and be visible. And that only helps you once you get on the air because the guys know who you are. They open up to you. And I'd like to think that what makes the content we put out here at Indiana State really special is that I'd like to hope, I know you've said this to me in passing, Harry, is that even if you're not in Terre Haute every day, you feel like you know our team very well, and not just you know the guys and their personalities. And through all of those little jobs and all the different things, I mean, there's way too many to list and we could bore you to death with them, but those all make you better in whatever your main task you want to be or whatever is your main goal. It only helps you. It will not detract from you in your time.
Luke, how do you balance baseball starting, all kinds of things? How do you balance the various things you have to do there in Terre Haute?
Like you said, it's a balance. I would say a lot when I was younger, when I started, 6 years ago, when I was 24 years old, I tend to work all the time. I mean, constantly. And we all know social media is constant. And that's the one thing about our industry that is great. But I've learned over the last couple of years, you got to take some time for yourself too. And yes, you want to balance and give everybody as much attention as you can. But I've spent more time doing stuff personally too, making sure you have a personal life that doesn't consume you all the time. That's one of the areas, Harry, where you get into this schedule, but it's also not balancing just your broadcast schedule. It's balancing your content schedule. So I work I'm situated in our communications department. So I work with all of our SIDs, and we just try to come up with a social media plan and strategy where, okay, what do we need this week? What do we need upcoming? And we just communicate with one another. And we try to come up with a plan to where work-wise, I know, okay, I'm going to be traveling here. I need time for game prep, but also need time to be able to ensure that you are getting content out on all of your teams. So it can be a challenge. But I think for me, I've been more refreshed the last couple of years, and I've not been working around the clock. Maybe we're early in my career, I was just busting, grinding, working till late night hours, just because, you fall in love with it, but you realize that you can't always keep up that pace as you go throughout the years. So trying to be smarter with that time, being better in your time management, all those things I think help when you get into this overlap period. And also just making sure Mitch Hannes is calm and nice, our baseball coach. So luckily, Coach Hannes is not, as Mike knows very well, he's just worried about his team playing. So he's not necessarily too worried about my schedule these days. But he's very excited to get their season started today against the Iowa down in Florida.
Late night hours, that sounds like me in Nashville last Friday. A lot of late night hours there.
Well, and then I wanted to ask you, Jonathan, early morning radio there with Cap in Chicago and on the road with the basketball team. Your life isn't exactly trimmed down and real easy, is it?
No, it's not. But you know what? It's fun. It's not work for me. The talk shows where we talk about Justin Fields, is he the guy? Yes or no? We do that 15 hours a week and talking about the Chicago sports. I mean, that's exhausting. But the fun is being able to go into one of these Valley stadiums or go into UIC and be able to do a basketball game for 2 hours. You know why, Harry? I'm not talking about salary caps. I'm not talking about free agency. I'm not talking about any of those things except sitting down, prepping for a basketball game, and then enjoying college basketball as much as I do. And so, people look at the schedule and say, how are you doing this? Well, got to make sure that you have an understanding wife. My wife's in the business as well. She works for MVC Chicago, so she understands my schedule. There's no way that I could have a partner that wouldn't understand, hey, this is the business. Like we're into basketball, we're into doing talk shows and podcasts. She understands my schedule. And when basketball season starts, she knows it's full stop. And it's a full commitment. You've got to be able to be all in. If the team's all in and they're willing to give you access, you got to be all in as a broadcaster. So, yeah, it's a lot of late nights and early mornings, but it beats working for a living.
Hey, talking about being all in, there was a couple of games back where you actually had to bring the uniforms. Can you tell us that story?
I don't know if that was supposed to be out there, but there's Harry once again digging in. My God. The Hugh Downs of the Missouri Valley digging in with the same story.
Age, yes.
My God. Well, yes, that was the case. I get a phone call, and it's from one of the guys that worked closely with Luke Yaklich, and says, "Hey, Jay Hood, how's it going?" There's the first thing. So he asked me how's it going, and I immediately got worried on the other end of the phone. I'm doing well. What's going on, pal? Yeah, so we're gonna hook you up with that interview with Coach Yaklich. She should be ready, after practice, maybe 6 o'clock. Yeah, that's great. Anything else? Yeah, listen, we're already down here with I believe it was Bradley. We're down here at Bradley. Is there any way that you could bring a bag for us? Yeah, no problem. What's in the bag? Our uniforms. I said, wait a minute. I said, hold on a second. You don't have our uniforms for the game? Like, yeah, if you could keep that down, that'd be really appreciated. I said, I'll be glad to keep that down. I won't tell anybody. Next morning, it's on the morning show, by the way.
Right.
Because of course, I won't tell anybody. Just maybe 125,000 people that listen to our morning show. 2 million on the podcast. That's no problem. I won't tell a soul that we forgot our uniforms for the game. And so it's just like, oh my God, how does that happen? And so, just like an armored, truck, there I am driving down with the uniforms. And I have it right there next to me at the scorer's table. And he said, thank you so much. I said, this is going to cost you. One day this is going to cost you, but you're welcome. Yeah.
Totally true. I want to ask both of y'all, start with you, Luke. Your broadcasting influences, Luke, who are the people you listened to as a young man or as a kid or coming up through the business that you went, man, those guys do it right. I want to be kind of like them.
For me, it was a no-brainer. Larry Clisby, who was the longtime voice at Purdue and who unfortunately recently passed away. And after his long fight with cancer, he was my biggest influence. And my family grew up big Purdue fans, so I listened to Joe McConnell a ton when he did Boilermaker football growing up as a kid. And Joe and Cliz were two major impacts on me, specifically Cliz, because I knew I had an interest in doing it. And it's a great story, but kind of the long story short version of it. My grandfather was an usher for years at Purdue, and he was going to introduce me to Cliz at one of the games. But unfortunately, right after a conversation that we had, my grandfather was taken away in a tragic car accident. So I didn't think that I would have the opportunity to meet Cliz. Well, somehow my grandfather said something to my grandmother. And when I came up to visit in the summer, had a knock at the door. I go and I open the door and it's Larry Clisby. And I was shocked. I was in awe. And Cliz, that year, I was a 7th grader at the time. Cliz invited me to come up and sit with him at a basketball game. And it's so funny. The basketball game that I came to, got to meet him, Rob Blackman, Ralph Taylor, Wes Scott, all those guys I still know really, really well and keep in touch with. Well, that game, they played Florida International. Robbie Hummel was a freshman that year. They were really good, the Baby Boilers. Well, they got down 18-0. They were down 18-0. And Cliz looks at me that day and he goes, you ain't ever coming back. Purdue came back to win the game. It was one of the craziest games, but that experience truly taught me, like, wow, this is so cool. Just following Cliz in the locker room, sitting down with, of course, Coach Painter, who's got Valley ties, and just seeing that relationship. And you're like, how awesome would that be to have that? And that was a driving force for me later on. And to really today, that's what's great about this league, Harry, and and that's what's been great about these calls is we are filled with so many great broadcasters. And especially for me as a young guy, it's not always necessarily easy being a young guy and being brought in, and you're surrounded by legends in this league like Mike Reese, Dave Snell, Gary Ryman when I started, Dick Luckey at Illinois State. And each and every one of those guys were so opening and so welcoming. And also Art Haynes at Missouri State. I think of this conversation I had with Art, or one night I've been thinking of a lot more because of obviously what Art's going through right now, is when we were at the Valley Championships this past year in baseball, all the bad weather that Mike Kern brought us that week, we had plenty of downtime. Well, we went to a Springfield, well-known place, Ebbets Field, which is right down from the ballpark. And that night it was me, Connor Onion, who is a classmate of mine, who does a lot of Valley games now and really blowing up on Big Ten Network and doing a tremendous job, and Mike Reese and Art Haynes. And it was us four. And told stories. It was the young guard versus the old guard, different ways of finding ways to do things. But it's those relationships now that Cliz Young getting me going. And there is still a ton for me to learn. And I'm telling you, whether it's the Varsity Network app, which I think is one of the greatest inventions of all time, I can pop through and listen to those guys, and even some of the newer guys in the league, whether it's JW. I think JW does a tremendous job at Northern Iowa. Love listening to him call. Michael does a great job at Drake. Fitz at Illinois State, who I'll see tomorrow. We are filled in this league with tremendous guys who care. I mean, you listen to Jay Hood do games, you know he cares about the people on the floor. You listen to Mike Reese, who's been there for so long, he still cares about Southern Illinois so much. Dave Snellbrow. That's what makes this league special, Harry, is those influences within the league.
They're great guys. Jonathan, I want to ask you the same question. The early influencers in your life and in your career specifically, but I wanted to also just say, Jonathan, as a man of color, there aren't a ton of play-by-play guys that are men of color. And do you feel a certain, maybe responsibility maybe is too big of a word, but I don't know, fill in the blanks for me there. I feel like that's an important thing for us to just mention and touch on today.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about it, Harry. I think that from my standpoint, I feel like if there's women, or people of color that feel like, I don't know if I could do this because I didn't play, I'm a shining example that you can. And so I don't know if it's responsibility as much as it is just trying to lead the way. Working with Illinois Media School in Lombard, Illinois, now I'm always being able to get a chance to talk to the next generation of broadcasters. And so for those that feel like I'm too old, or I don't know if I have the chops to do this, I didn't play because I can only do color. That's not the case. I think that from my standpoint, when you're in the right place at the right time, you can do anything in this business. When Dave Jude left his post as play-by-play guy for UIC, remember I was doing pregame at half, and I told Rick Harrigan, I go, no, I got it. You don't need to go through an exhaustive search. I'm already part of the broadcast. I already love the UIC Flames. I got it. And they didn't know that I had done, previous work doing play-by-play in college. And I said, yeah, no worries. I got it. So I think that from that standpoint, leading by example, being in that chair, I think that shows that you can do it no matter what you look like or what your background is. A kid from the South Side, being able to live a dream, being able to be the voice of a college team, there's nothing better. From my standpoint, I think Dave Bennett is one of those guys for the Northwestern Wildcats, someone that I've enjoyed over the years. I think he's the best in our state as far as play-by-play. I think he does an excellent job. Love Dave. John Rooney, that's already in the Valley. I grew up listening to him call Chicago White Sox games right up to he called the 2005 World Series championship. And he did so much radio for basketball and for baseball nationally. Big fan of John. I just think that he's one of the voices of my childhood. One of the reasons why I want to be in the business is because of John. I don't know if John knows that, but it's the case. And of course, the late Jim Durham. Nobody could call a game like him. And as a Chicago Bulls fan, and this is coming from me because for me, growing up with the radio, I had no qualms of turning down the TV sound and listening to the radio because there's nothing like that pure radio call. Now, this whole thing where I've got to put on makeup and put on a suit and tie, that's nonsense. The pure play-by-play is the radio. It always will be. The radio and the stream these days, right? That's where it's about, painting that picture. I love that. When I've got to go to ESPN Plus, I know it's part of what we do at UIC, but just all the machinations and the wires and all these boxes in front of me, just give me a Comrex and get out of the way. Let me just call the game and just paint the picture. That's to me, that's the pure play-by-play. But that's just me being I'm a cranky old man when it comes to that. But but Jim Durham though, guys, I mean, you talk about all those World Championships and the way he called it, and of course, as you know, Luke, that whole thing with the simulcast where you're doing TV and radio, and so it's going to sound like a radio call on TV, but Jim Durham made it comfortable for the TV audience, even though he's doing the radio as well. So he's unmatched in my eyes on the NBA side, that's for sure.
You mentioned John Rooney, and for my money, John Rooney doing NCAA tournament games on the radio is like Picasso. I mean, there's nobody better. I mean, he was so stinking good. And when he went to TV, I thought, it's such a waste because of how awesome I think he is at radio. Listen, we're kind of going long. Jonathan, I want you to tell us a little bit about the Flames. They have not been winning for a while, but this is a young team and they've been battling injuries. Just give us a little insight into Luke's squad and just where you see them at this stage of the season.
Well, first things first, Harry, I said to Luke, one of these road trips, it might have been, gosh, I don't think it was last week, but it might have been in Terre Haute. It might have been there where I said, you know what, Coach, you're going through a tough time, but I love your body language. And he said, Hoodie, what do you mean? I said, you know what? I said, we're going through a tough time, but you bring up confidence in the program where, yeah, you have a lot of freshmen and you're going through a lot of injuries, but you don't seem down. You always have energy. He's always straightforward. So I give him credit for that. As far as the ball club is concerned, this has really been a litmus test for the coaching staff and for the team. This is not the Horizon League. This is the Missouri Valley. And for some of the players that were over on the other side on the Horizon League, this has been something. I'll give you the story of Christian, one of our young players, Christian Jones. And I asked him in the middle of the season, I said, what's the difference between high school and college? He goes, well, everybody here in college can play. That's the difference. And so there's the adjustment of just going from high school to the Missouri Valley, the physicality, how so many people can shoot the ball well, fundamentally sound, and just being able to move the ball side to side. Our club is learning how to play the Missouri Valley way. And it's a big difference than when we were in the Horizon League. Horizon has got their own style. They've got some good players, but you talk about well coached and succinct on passes. If you don't have anything in 2 seconds, you better pass that ball. We saw that in Belmont on Saturday. Yes, and so our kids are getting used to the physicality and the speed of the game. And so it's tough now with Jace Carter being out and Trey Anderson being out. But I think that these freshmen will learn that there's a different style in the Missouri Valley. They have to adapt to it.
Yeah, and good young players as well. I've seen the guys talk to them a little bit. Good young players too, a couple more, and as they adjust, that Flame program would be just fine. Luke, your Sycamores won their first 6, lost their next 5. Now they've won their next 6. Which team is this Sycamore team, Luke Martin?
It has been a year of runs. And what's been so remarkable about this current stretch is it's the first time in program history that Indiana State has won 5 in a row by 10 or more points. I mean, a lot of these games have been, I think the closest margin of victory in the last 5 games has been 18 points. And I think it comes down to shooting, Harry. You know, Coach Schertz takes a lot of pride in so many facets of being a really good defensive team. I know sometimes that may be a foreign concept that people may not think that Indiana State really takes pride on defense with Coach Schertz's offensive scheme, but they're right up there in defensive efficiency with some of the best teams in this league. But it was those shots. I mean, you go back to that 5-game losing skid, Indiana State shots 23% from 3. I mean, it was brutal. When Mike was there at Murray State, Corvassier and McCauley could hit threes, but the rest of the team went 0 for 20 that day. He went 5 for 10. The rest of the team went 0 for 20. Now, of course, it's really flipped where they went and had 2 straight games where they made the most out of any Valley team in the country. But it has been just the consistency factor from that regard of just shots being able to go in, but also this team having a little bit more confidence. And look, Cam Henry by far is Indiana State's best player because he can touch so many different areas. Corvassier McCauley is the best scorer because he can go out and nearly outscore a team for a half, which is he had the exact same amount of points as UIC did in the first half earlier this week, and he nearly outscored Miami earlier this year in non-con. But
all right, don't rub it in. All right, Luke, that's enough.
Hey, I don't mean to rub it in, J Hood. I promise I won't rub it in, J Hood. Just to prove a point, I got you. I could have left that out. I apologize.
That hurts. Okay, go ahead.
But if you look for Indiana State, the most impactful player is Julian Larry. Julian Larry, when he is on it, when he is impactful in games, there's not very many times where you see Indiana State win a game and Julian Larry was not a big part. You will see games where Indiana State wins and maybe Cam Henry didn't have the best stat line. And even sometimes Corvassier and McCauley, his shot maybe wasn't falling in those games. But there's not very often you will find a game that Indiana State wins and Julian Larry was not a big reason why. I think that's been the difference. In that 5-game stretch, he was turning the basketball over at a very high clip. That's not been the case recently. So look, it comes down to shooting, the ball going through the basket, and that's helped Indiana State in many more ways. But it has been a season of streaks. There's no question about that.
When I was there with you, the Crevassier didn't do much in that game, and they beat Northern Iowa. I mean, just to your point. And when I was there with you, we went out to dinner. So if people are coming to Terre Haute, where do they want to go to get a good meal, pregame, postgame, those kinds of things? I don't remember the name of the place we went to, but then there was this other place that you said that's where all the college students go. At least tell us a couple of places.
Okay, well, there's plenty of places. What I was so proud about was this year I was able to tell Mike Reese and Dave Snell about a great place to eat here in town, and they never heard of it. And they've been coming around for 40 plus years. So that's Charlie's Pub and Grill. Charlie's is really good, just off Crawford Street here in town. That's a great place. I got a rib hunter, Tickle, who you guys had on early when these podcasts started. He called it Huckleberries. It's actually Cackleberries. He got the name wrong. That's okay. Hunter's not been here very long. But Cackleberries, if you're looking for a great breakfast spot, Cackleberries just off campus, great place to go. I took you to Moggers, Harry.
Moggers, that's right.
Moggers was a great place to eat. The Ballyhoo Tavern, that's where a lot of the college kids go. That's right next to Holman Center. They're kind of known for their Pizza King pizza and some certain beverages that you can get at the Ballyhoo Tavern as well. I mentioned Charlie's and Charlie's and Moggers, kind of good lunch place or even dinner place if you want to have. But if you really, what's great about Terre, and I mean this in sincerity, is there are some really nice restaurants where you can feel like you are in Chicago. And two of them are Jay Ford's, a tremendous steak place. If you're making that Mike Kern money, you can go to Jay Ford's. And also Stables here in town. Stables and Jay Ford's are kind of our two nicest restaurants. And even though Terre Haute may not be seen, it's funny, a former colleague of mine who I used to work with, Matt Luking, who was just a tremendous person who we lost way too soon. He always called Terre Haute the city of restaurants. And there is just about any chain you can find, but also there's some really good local places that I just told you about.
Before Jonathan tells us about all the deep dish pizza and all that stuff in Chicago, you guys have quite a promotion coming this weekend. Luke, can you tell us about it?
We do, and actually it's going to be Look Like Robbie Day on Saturday, and I even got a pair of the goggles here I can put on. So the first 2,500 fans are going to get goggles on Saturday against the Redbirds tomorrow. So it's gonna be a lot of fun. Robbie's been a huge impact this year. I got to take these off. These are kind of hard to talk through and look through at the same time, but I'll save you a pair, Harry. Jay Hood, if you want, I could save you two of mine. I could save you all a pair. Mike maybe doesn't need goggles. He's got glasses anyway, so he's ready to roll this morning. But yeah, it's a tremendous promotion. Looking forward to it tomorrow. Jacob Hine, who is basically a mini-me of Robbie. We did a fun video with him this week in promotion of that game. So it's been a lot of fun.
Oh, he's putting a uni on. It was awesome. Jonathan, obviously we know Chicago is a gigantic city, but someplace near UIC or some places near UIC where people should go to get a meal, to get a beverage around a Flames game.
Well, there's a number of places, as you will know, in this world-class city, but I will give you Riccobenni's. It's the breaded steak sandwich that you just can't finish. You can ask for the large, you can ask for the small. It's still as big as our head. That place is tremendous. And because UIC is pretty close to Guaranteed Rate Field where the White Sox play, Riccobenni's is a great place. I mean, like maybe 7-10 minutes away, right away from campus. Hawkeyes is the closest bar, an Iowa bar, but it's a hybrid UIC Iowa bar. So Hawkeyes is a great place to be able to have a few daddy sodas. Also, the other place is, those two, Connie's Pizza. Connie's Pizza is right there. Now, let me just tell everybody. So people believe that everybody in Chicago loves deep dish pizza. That's not the case. You want the tavern style, quite frankly. I mean, if you want to be able to have a nice pizza meal, you don't want to have the big brick and then that's all you have and take the rest home. The thought is that everyone likes the deep dish. I do not. I'm good with the tavern style. I'll take the squares all day. You eat more that way. You don't want to have someone in a wheelbarrow taking you out because it's too heavy because you had heavy pizza. Now I'll take the squares. I think that's even better. So those are three places that come to mind. It's right around UIC, and it's tremendous food and beverage.
I shouldn't do this, but I'm gonna anyway. For people that haven't been to Chicago, talk about Ed Bedevic.
Yeah. That's a long time place. Ed Bedevic has been around for a long time. And it's in downtown. There's a couple of places, but definitely downtown Chicago. Tremendous food, tremendous drink. Haven't been there in a few years, but I think that if you're a tourist, it's a place that you want to be able to stop by. That's for sure. You want to hit that if you're going to be around for a weekend.
Yeah, and they on purpose treat you mean. I mean, it's just a weird play. I mean, like I've been there a time or two, and they yell at you and throw things at you. It's an amazing experience. So anyway, guys, really appreciate your time, Mike. We are just over like a week and a half away from Arch Madness, and wow, the race is crazy. So fill us in on the latest details, Mike, on Arch Madness.
Yeah, thank you, Harry. A couple of takeaways from today's conversation. Jay Hood, you mentioned that you don't have to be a player to be a play-by-play voice. I didn't play, and I couldn't do what you three do. You'll all be doing games from Arch Madness, and looking forward to seeing all of you and hearing you. For fans, tickets are available, and you can get them on Ticketmaster or go to our site, archmadness.com, for some great discounts. But the best way to sit with your team fan block is to go through your ticket office at your school. That's the best way to do that.
I talked to Commissioner Jackson earlier this week, Mike, and he said ticket sales are up, interest is up, that it's going to be a nice weekend.
Yeah, the race being as tight it is at the top, all the teams at the top have interest, but all the teams not at the top have interest. We've got a lot of interest from 1 through 12 in our tournament, as it should be. It's going to be a great event, and honestly, who knows who's going to win this thing? It's all going to be about matchups. We have a bunch of teams who could find themselves playing on Sunday. Could be exciting in St. Louis. Jay Hood, I want to tell you something, a little fact about the building that's just north of Enterprise Center is called Steeple Theater. That was at one time Kiel Auditorium. We had wrestling at the Chase that was filmed there until the building shut down. And actually our first conference tournament was in that building at Kiel Auditorium in 1991 here in St. Louis. It was probably good that they tore it down and rebuilt it. Steeple Theater is a place where we will have our Hall of Fame
wrestling
on Friday morning. But
Sam Munchnick, one of the most trusted promoters and owners of a wrestling territory at that time. Harley Race, he reigned in St. Louis. Some great matches at the Checker Dome as well, but it was all around that St. Louis area. That was a hot ticket for a weekly show that St. Louis had. That was tremendous. A young Ric Flair, Spike Huber. Yeah, absolutely. St. Louis is it's a great wrestling hub. Everyone wanted to come to St. Louis for wrestling because Sam Munchnick.
Jay Hood dropping the knowledge, man. I love it.
That's what I do.
You're all over it, and I will say that both of your teams are led by guys who have positive energy. And I think that was great that you brought that up, Jay Hood. Both Luke and Josh have the teams pointed in the right direction. Josh is up at the top, and I think UIC will be up at the top at one point with Luke also. Shout out to the wives for anybody that's in college athletics or in sports in general. The wives have been very supportive of all of us. So I think thank you for bringing that up, Jay Hood, and your great broadcast partners that you have. They did play basketball. Matt Wren, of course, and Kenny Williams. Great athletes, great Hall of Famers in my mind for both of those two guys. And I think that's all I have, Harry. Again, buy your tickets. And I want to thank Luke. I want to thank you, Jay Hood, for joining us today. Appreciate all your insights. I think we've all learned a little bit about both of you. And again, Harry, thank you for all you do for the league and hosting this show.
Always fun. Always fun.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Harry.
Thank you, guys.